I think one of the most important things to stand out today and not be a robot in the sea of sameness is to just be authentically yourself. Use the words and pictures that tell your story in the most authentic way possible. And that's what people are going to be attracted to. That's why they're going to remember you. And that's why they're going to want more of your products and services, because they'll understand who you are, what your reason for being is, and why it's important.
Welcome to Women Leaders on the Move, a Her C-Suite radio podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Benamou, and every week I bring you inspirational stories and ideas to help you with the arc of your career and your personal life. And I am also the founder of Her C-Suite, a powerful network community. We are creating an ecosystem where women leaders on the move can meet, engage, and thrive in meaningful ways through our mastermind circles, as well as our private network connect circles, where businesses and coaches are leading their customers inside our platform. I hope you'll check all the things out on hercsuite.com, especially our Leaders on the Move circle dedicated to you. You can meet many of the people that are on this show in her C-suite. Network with them, ask them questions, and you can come to office hours with me. Visit us at hercsuite.com to learn all the details. Today, I am excited for you to hear this conversation with Paige Arnof-Fenn. She is the CEO of Mavens Moguls, and we talk all about personal branding in a digital world, and also all the ways that you can be authentic. It can be overwhelming to know what is the best way to be authentic. And that's some of the things that we talk about today so that you can level up your experience and also build trust and resilience for your business and how you approach your career. Paige reflects on the pivotal moments in her career, the challenges of running a business, and the importance of authenticity and resilience in leadership. Our discussion offers you insights on how Paige navigated the transition from being in the corporate world to entrepreneurship and all the lessons along the way. Let's get started with this conversation. I know you are going to feel so inspired. Let's get started now. Paige, I'm really excited to welcome you to Women Leaders on the Move today. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Me too. Our listeners are going to love this conversation. But before we get into all the details, I always like to ask to know a little bit about you, the arc of your career. You work with amazing clients and doing amazing things. Tell us a little bit about that and how you ended up to where we are today.
So I joke I'm like the accidental entrepreneur. When I was in college, I thought I wanted to be Meg Whitman. I was going to go run a Fortune 500 business, big global brand, travel the world. So I graduated from college in like the mid to late 80s, and Michael Douglas had just won the Oscar for the first Wall Street movie. I fell in love with the movie and decided I was going to go to Wall Street, conquer the world. I made a 2-year commitment, and I realized within a few weeks it was not going to be my future. But I thought I'm going to make the best of it. I was analytically comfortable and I was good at it, but I didn't really love the work. We worked ridiculous hours, but when the job ended, I decided to go back and get an MBA, and I rebranded myself to be a marketing person. And my summer internship was at Procter Gamble in Cincinnati. And P&G is like the mecca of marketing. They invented the concept of brand management. And so I started my career in the paper division at Procter and got promoted to the cosmetics and fragrance division, which was a lot more fun with much better focus groups. I had a ball. I was there for about 3.5 years. And I left to go run a joint venture for the Olympics for the 96 games in Atlanta. And here we are in another Olympic year. And then I went to Coca-Cola as the assistant chief marketing officer. So I look at that first chapter of my career as being more corporate, big brands, big names, but the internet started taking off. This is now like the mid to late 90s. And it was like a shiny object that I became enamored with. So I left my big, cushy corporate job at Coke and joined a startup as the head of marketing. This is like Internet 1.0 out in Los Angeles. And it was a wild ride. We raised like $40 million. We went public. We were sold to Yahoo. Then my husband got a job in Boston. So we moved here to the East Coast. I did another startup as the head of marketing and they got sold. I did another startup as the head of marketing. They also went public and got sold. So my second chapter of my career was really more kind of startup marketing. I did not have bajillions of dollars in budget to work with. So I got very scrappy and good at guerrilla marketing and just learning how to do more with less. And when 9/11 happened, I had just gotten bought out of the third startup and I hung out a shingle and I started helping companies who needed help because marketing dollars just got cut across the board right after 9/11 because the stock market crashed and everyone was scared. They needed to conserve cash. But a lot of the businesses I had worked for at startups, they were venture backed, and I knew a lot of people in private equity and VC. And they reached out and said, "Can you help my portfolio? We're in trouble." And here we are. So I ended up getting a bunch of people I had worked with earlier in my career who were all out of work. And I called the women the marketing mavens, the guys the marketing moguls. And we just started kind of blocking and tackling and forming teams based on what our clients needed. And that was 22 years ago, and it's still going strong.
It's so interesting. You talked about going to Wall Street, and I think all those steps that you took with the M&A experience, right? And going through the rise and then the acquisition, being on Wall Street, even if only for a short time, must have given you some inkling of like what are the things that you have to pay attention to, what's that finance, and especially getting your MBA, I would imagine that helped too. That how did that help you when you're going through, because being acquired and then going public, and or not acquired but going public, that's a big thing.
That's such an excellent question. Most people don't connect the dots. That's really very perceptive. Yeah, when you're a financial analyst on Wall Street, all you care about are the spreadsheets and the numbers. Does it make sense on paper? And so I knew that I could make the numbers work. And because I had been an economics major in college, I was always very good with numbers. I was very comfortable in that bucket. When I moved to the startups that all went through these mergers, acquisitions, IPOs, you realize there's a human side to all of this. And the culture is really what matters. Who the acquirer is, who the acquiree is, how are they going to work together if they have very different personalities, very different brands. And so I really got to see behind the numbers, behind the spreadsheets. I mean, the good news is all three of my startups were dot-com survivors. None of them were Google, Facebook, LinkedIn. So I'm not Sheryl Sandberg. I didn't make $2 billion, but I made a little money 3 times. And I ended up leaving all of the startups because I joined them for the little company that they were. And I loved being part of the DNA of those early businesses. When you work for brands at P&G or Coke, these brands are decades or even 100 years old. And so that ball is rolling downhill with or without you. And P&G, like I said, they invented the concept of brand management. So P&G and Coke are market leaders in every single category they compete in. They're number one and maybe also number two. So they have a system, they know it works, it's bulletproof. If you want to drop a coupon, if you want to launch a new product, you want to change the pricing, the packaging, they have a system for everything. And if you would talk to any of my bosses from my corporate chapter, they would probably say, "Natalie, here's the thing. Paige works really hard. She's really smart, but boy, was she a pain in the butt." Every time I gave her a project, she'd say, how about we think about this? Or what if we tried this? I don't need what if we tried this. I just need her to follow the rules. Paint by numbers. We have a system, it works. Just do what I tell you to do. And it's funny because I never thought of myself as being entrepreneurial. But now looking back at my corporate career, I realize I'm amazed I was as successful as I was because I was always trying to bend, break, or change the rules. And I think that's what made me successful in the startup world because there were no rules. When I showed up, there was no marketing department. I was building it from the ground floor. And when you work for a big company with millions of dollars of budget, you do market research that's statistically significant. It can take months, even up to a year, to do all the research. When you're working for a startup, you don't have months or a year to do research. Those companies will be out of business if you don't make a decision and move forward right away. So the startups, we would literally use Zoomerang or SurveyMonkey, throw something out there, test it immediately, intercepting people on the street who look like your target audience, asking questions, going back to the office, updating your website based on what you heard a few hours ago, and then coming in the next morning and seeing what they clicked on and seeing what worked. And then we were just rapid prototyping and doing it the next day, the next day. We were moving every single day. We didn't have time to send out thousands of surveys or do focus groups in every region of the country. That's just not the way the internet works. So I learned how to be scrappy and resourceful. And I think as hierarchical and slow as things can be in corporate, I was able to kind of pivot very successfully in a startup environment and just hit the ground running and tell my team. I had very young teams with not a lot of corporate experience, if any. And so I would tell them, like, here's the theory of what we're doing, but we got to do something much quicker. We need to take a few detours. We need to kind of shuck and jive, make a decision, and move forward. And I think it really helped me. And then moving from the startup world to my own business as an entrepreneur, I just feel like each one of those chapters was so important and I learned so much, but all the roads converged to make me able to start my own business. And now, more than 2 decades later, it's hard to believe it's still going strong.
What are some of the things that you've learned recently? Because things have changed so much in the last 4 years. And as we look forward with adjusting to trends in marketing and certainly in startups, and that's the world I live in, so I can relate in many of the things that you're talking about. I can relate, having been through the .com and all the changes and everything. But today, marketers and startups are in a little bit of different place. What do you tell people that they need to be, I guess, agile and flexible about when they're thinking about their marketing?
So, if we learned anything during the pandemic, we learned that if you don't exist online, you don't exist. So, your online presence really matters today. And people don't know if you're a mom and pop or you're General Motors. You've got to have a face on the web. So, if people Google you and nothing pops up, why would they take the time to have a meeting, Zoom with you, grab coffee? You're irrelevant. If they Google you and a lot of digital dirt comes up, you've got another problem. But if they Google you and they see you have a very professional website, you clean up well online, they understand your value proposition, where you add value, what problems you solve, then they're intrigued. Then they check you out on social media. Who is this person? They kick the tires and look under the hood. In your business and my business, LinkedIn is really important. You want to make sure you have a really strong profile with the good keywords and recommendations and a summary with hitting all the buttons. That's really what matters most. But for other people, it might be Facebook or X or Instagram. Whatever it is, make sure that where people are going to be looking for you, that you clean up well. The risk I always see And I always tell my clients, don't spread yourself too thin. I think what happens is sometimes people want to be very buttoned up on LinkedIn because it's a professional website, but on X, the old Twitter, they try and be a little snarky or maybe show kind of a crazy sense of humor. And then on Facebook, they want to show themselves as being very social, maybe, at the beach in a bikini, or that can be very dangerous from a brand standpoint. I'm a marketing person and you want to tell a consistent story. And so you want to make sure that however you're showing up online, you're planting seeds and the breadcrumbs lead in a consistent direction. I think people that spread themselves too thin and are not careful about reinforcing a consistent message, you're not building trust. And a brand is a relationship you have with your audience, and you want them to trust you. You want them to believe in you. You want them to know which version of you is going to show up every time. And just think about it with other brands that you interact with, Starbucks, McDonald's, or other professionals. If you walked into a Starbucks in New York, California, overseas, and everyone looked different, the menu was different, everything about it was different, you would be completely confused. You have to relearn everything. That would be a very steep hill to climb. But when you see Starbucks, you know what to expect. You're very comfortable. You have a relationship with them. You can go in, sit and read. You can just pick up, take out. And if you order your latte or frappuccino, you know what you're going to get from them every single time. That's how you build long-term relationships. That's how you retain your customers. That's why they keep coming back for you. So I think one of the biggest lessons since the pandemic is build a strong brand, build a consistent brand, and make sure you show up online. With a name like mine and a name like yours, chances are if they Google us, they're going to find you and find me. But if you happen to have a name that's generic, John Smith, Bob Jones, that's a little trickier. And so there's a lot of noise. And so you may want to include your LinkedIn profile in your signature so they know who you are and how to find you. And if you share a name with like a serial killer or a porn star or somebody that has kind of a weird background, you want to make sure that you're like in on the joke. So if somebody agrees to meet with you and you sit down, you say, well, thank you so much for meeting me. I guess you figured out I'm not the serial killer with this name. Like, it shows that you're smart, that you're tech savvy, you have a sense of humor, but that's really just important. The other thing, and again, I started my marketing career at P&G. Procter is probably the most data-driven company in the world. They love to analyze everything. When I started my own company, my bias was, let's start the project with some market research. Let's get grounded in who our customer is, what's important to them. And a lot of clients, when I started 20 plus years ago, would say, yeah, I don't really have the appetite for research. I don't want to waste the time or the money. Let's just jump in and start working. And that always made me a little uncomfortable because P&G just drills into you how important it is to really understand your specific target audience. I think one of the great things that happened during the pandemic is so many things in our life changed. What we wear to work, where we go to work, how we work, where we vacation, everything about our habits have changed. And so now, coming out of the pandemic, customers and clients understand the value of market research because they do need to check in with their target audience and see how their lives have changed and whether their product or service is still relevant, whether they own other real estate in that target audience's brain. Who else are they competing with that they might not have been competing with before the pandemic? So I think the value of really kind of taking one step back before you take 3 steps forward. I'm much more comfortable in the world where, clients see the value in market research. So those, I'd say, are the 2 biggest trends.
And with AI, you can do research so quickly. Now with the 4.0, I have the paid version and I highly recommend. It's a big difference, ChatGPT having the ability to level up and do more real time as opposed to like 2 years ago kind of data. What are you seeing in terms of that with brands and especially entrepreneurs? I think the best thing for entrepreneurs is saving time and money. If you know how to do the prompts, you know how to use it, and never rely on it actually being your voice. Last night, I'll give you an example and then I'll let you answer. So we did an event yesterday. We were talking about this before we started. And I was like, I'm going to do the summary. So I took the transcript off the video, I put it in a chat, and it was so inaccurate. It was so off base. And I even told the chat, I said, don't use outside research, only use the words I'm giving, tell the story from each of the speakers. And it just simply made stuff up. It said one of the people had a brother that died that wasn't in the conversation. I mean, really bad. Like, and finally, after like 2 hours, I was like, why didn't I just rewrite this? Because I'm actually a good writer and I could have done it, but I was trying to save time and be responsive, like, duh. And so sometimes it doesn't always save us time. I guess that's my,
I think that's a really important point to make. I think you raised one big red flag that it's not accurate. It can kind of go down a rat hole.
really bad.
Yeah, and unless you're paying attention, you're putting a lot of misinformation or disinformation out there. I think the other big risk with AI is, as you said, it's not your voice,
Mm,
and you start sounding like a robot, and it's very generic and watered down.
yeah.
I think the most important thing you can do from a marketing and branding standpoint is to be authentically you. You own your lane. Don't worry about everyone else's lane. You be you and be the best version of you. And so I always tell people the AI that I work on most are authentic interactions,
So
like
good.
making sure that you have really good conversations online and offline and show your humanity. Tell the stories that only you can tell, because there is a lot of generic, kind of watered down blah out there. And it's not helping anybody, and it's not even correct, most of it. So I do think people do want to use and leverage all the latest and greatest shiny objects out there, but use with caution and take baby steps. Don't jump in and get too far down. Don't be scared to, like what you said. You hit the panic button and said, wait a minute, this is not working. I'm going to try and correct it.
Yeah, I
But if
actually
you,
abandoned the whole thing. I was just like, I'm gonna start tomorrow. It was really late. And I was like, I think my brain's fried. I'm not gonna do that anymore.
no, but
I'm
you
gonna
did the
write it
right
up
thing.
myself the next
You
day.
absolutely did the right thing.
You're right. Here's my five. I don't know if you have five. Let's just end with this because I think there's like, here's my five. My top five AI words. Delves. Like we delve into. That's like super. Unleash your potential, unlock your potential. Those are my top three. I'm trying to think of two more. There's always like these words that are just not used in normal speech that like now is in everything. And sometimes I've even like tried to game the system. And sometimes I've made a title on a podcast just to see, well, is that going to get more likes or not? Like unlock, unleash. How is it trending? Is that a word? But it's so not. So what are some words that you've seen that are really not like overused AI?
Again, if it sounds unnatural to
Yeah.
you, if it's not authentic to you, your customers and clients are savvy. They know when it's real and they know when it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you think you're using words that make you sound smart, or you think you're kind of using the buzzword du jour or whatever, I think that is a very dangerous pond to play in. So if it doesn't just flow naturally, if you're reading it out loud, reading it to yourself and you're kind of stumbling on it, or you say, that's not a word I really use, or that's not really what I was trying to say, I think like you need to stop immediately and take a step back and say, this is not working. It's not me. It's not fool anybody.
If people want to know more about the work you're doing, because I think it's so interesting and being authentic and helping businesses, and especially, of course, in our space, and I'm super passionate about women entrepreneurs, but in general, where's on LinkedIn, I'm guessing, but where's the best place for them to find you?
Yep, LinkedIn is a great place to find me. My last name is hyphenated, but on LinkedIn, it's all smushed together. PaigeArnoffenn. I have a website, mavensandmoguls.com. It's mavensandmoguls.com. Or as one of my clients always says, because my company has an ampersand and my last name has a hyphen, she can only remember two words, which is Paige and Mavens. So if you Google that, the good news is search engine optimization really works, and you can find me that way. Anytime, I'll pop right up.
I love that. That's great to be distinguishable on search. Paige, I've had so much fun talking with you today. Thank you for being on the show. I can't wait to release this and for our listeners to hear all about these things. So thanks for being on the show today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you for spending your time with us today. I hope that you found value on your time by listening to the show. And if you did, would you rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app? It's how people find us and can join you as a listener. And also, if you found the tips helpful, share it with a friend or colleague. I hope that this inspires you to think about how to be authentic. Drop me a line and let me know what part of this show you found helpful. And if you're a member of her C-Suite Leaders on the Move, you can send me a message and tell me what you liked about the show. I also record special personalized messages just for that circle in her C-Suite. So take a look at hercsuite.com and get all the details. Keep shining your light bright. The world needs you.